Hello and welcome everyone to Spirit Matters, your daily Bhakti Center podcast, where we talk about all types of spiritual things and bringing it into a practical perspective for this modern world that we're living in. My name is Kishore Chandra, and I'm here with Achyuta Gopi. We usually have Dayal here, but he is working it. He is working on his script, and we're filming here in London actually starting tomorrow. So Doyal is just, you know, working it to the last moment because we got to make sure things are tight for the script. I feel like we've been in this like bubble. We're in London, but we're just in a room working. That's what we're doing. And we have our live studio audience, Lei Shirley all the way in Brazil, Irenka coming from Washington Square Park, Pasha and Lane coming from somewhere in the Northwest or California. I can't remember which one. Thank you everyone so much for being here. Achyuta, how are you this morning? I know you're not feeling so well.
I'm hanging in,
You're
hanging
hanging
in.
in.
I'm getting through it. Yeah, it was like after yesterday's episode, I was just kind of like, I haven't been feeling so good for a few days now. And even yesterday, like I realized, like I did that episode with a fever. But
Hmm.
we are here.
We are here. Good. I am glad. We are still talking about Lord Ram,
Yeah.
Ram, Sri Ram. And yesterday was so nice. I think we really, the conversation yesterday was so nice, and it really has me thinking a lot. And we were for those of you that stayed on after we stopped recording, we went for it. it was like the that scene in those movies that comes after the credits. That's kind of how
Yeah.
it was. Like we were just sharing videos and like it was
I mean, I
ridiculous.
found out things that I never knew before.
Me too. I had no idea what any of those things were. But I think that goes to show you that even in these ancient stories that we're talking about, because we're leading up to Ram Nomi, which is the festival that happens every year, where we're celebrating the appearance of Lord Ram. So we thought it would be nice to figure out and share who is Lord Ram and what are these stories and what are we actually celebrating. And I think yesterday was very testament to the fact that these stories and this history really about these celestial beings, um, it has a lot to do with today. Like all of that stuff, it can be imported in as lessons into today. And I think the biggest thing for me is just like we say this a lot in this podcast, like, and I think you said it yesterday. These problems that we're having now existed 5,000 years ago, existed 10,000 years ago, existed a million years ago. Like Lord Ram was having these problems, Krishna was having these problems, Shiva was Arjuna, like all of these people were having these problems. So I think it's really cool to actually dive into this stuff. So we'll have a little story time with the Chuta, and then we'll chat. We'll chat about it.
Yeah. I feel like today gets like it gets a little heavier. Um, and I feel like there's a lot of that happens in the Ramayana. It kind of it does a little bit of this and then it does that. And then it just kind of it and then it I personally I don't find that Ramayana has those like really high moments. It's like it gets to a point of like we're bearable and bearable is happy. And then it sinks down again and then it gets to a point another point and it's like bearable. And so one of the things that I always like to point out when dealing with Ramayana and thinking about Ram is that he advents in order to show perfection. Literally, it's supposed to be the ideal man, the perfect son, the perfect father, perfect king, perfect husband. He is perfect. And then we get to see what all like the perfect person has to go through because you kind of think like, oh, like nobody can make everybody happy unless you're perfect or you're God. And now God is like, and now I will show you what it's like when I'm perfect. And it's not always so great. So today it gets a little heavier. We fast forward past the Gurukula ages. So like 5 to 16, he was in the ashram of his guru, and he comes home and everyone is happy. So once again, we've like gone to this nice like happy plateau. Parents are happy to see him. Moms welcome him back home. They haven't seen like their children have grown up. Like it's like when you see a kid that you went on pilgrimage with, or like if you were to see like Bali and Danya's kid, after like 10 years, you're like, oh my god, this kid's a whole human functioning adult. So it's kind of like that. And Ram comes back home, everybody's happy, things are going well, and then one day they get a visit from a very esteemed sage. His name is Vishwamitra, and he's kind of what's called a Rajrishi, which he used to be a king, then he turned into a sage. And that doesn't normally happen. Like you get a few instances of them, but usually if you're a king, kind of stay a king. You don't like renounce everything and go into the forest and try to become a sage. But this sage, he had even decided that he wanted to like create another heavenly celestial realm of his own. Like he really had like ambitions that he wanted to tackle. And the only way that he was able to tackle them was to become a sage and amass all of this supernatural power through austerity. And so what I really kind of think is quite interesting is how you can look at all the ways yoga is used. There's all these demons and all of these people, and they're using yoga, and 90% of it is not for the spiritual realization that we like, or like, oh, let's like bring yoga back to what yoga is supposed to be. It's not all about like poses on an Instagram feed. And back at this time, it kind of was also, they were having that problem. It's like, this is not what yoga and tapasya was for. But they were using it to amass supernatural powers, and followers, and all kinds of things, and clout, and building up their own ambitions. And because of all of his ambitions, he actually had a feud with Vashishta Muni, who was actually the guru of Ram, who he just spent 10, 11 years at his ashram. They have this feud that goes back for thousands of years. And there's like cow stealing that happens with it, and like, property stealing and all this stuff that goes on, and they're like going through it, and you're like, wait, these are the holy men? Yes, these are the holy men. So nothing is new. Like you said, Kishore, nothing is new. Everything that is being dealt with now has been dealt with for millions of years. It's material world stuff. So Vishwamitra comes and he enters into the kingdom of Dasrath, and Dasrath is, when a guest comes, the culture within Vedic cultures, you treat this guest as good as God. Really, because you never know who that guest could be. And this comes from a time when the gods and celestials would just pop in. You get, Narada Muni, he's like this celestial sage. He pops in all over the place, in different places, and has conversations. The time where the men and gods, they met and they had conversations. And so, yeah, you've got to treat every guest as good as a celestial being, because it could very well be a celestial being, whether in disguise or as themselves. You never know who you're talking to. So this sage comes, and he says, "Oh, King Dasarath, your family is known for their valor and truthfulness." And Vishwamitra actually has a really long history with this family lineage of Dasarath. And it's a long, sordid history, but they have a big deal with like vows and promises, so much so that Vishwamitra approached a king in Dasarath's line and was like, look, you had a dream where you had donated your kingdom to me in a dream. I want the kingdom. And the king is now thinking, well, what do I do? I mean, it was a dream, but he winds up giving him the kingdom. And it's a whole long tale, and it's not happy. And I'm like, why? 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 But they're going to stick to this vow of truthfulness. And if we remember on the first day, I said, there's a very famous line about Ram's lineage. I'll give up my life, but I won't give up my vow. So Vishwamitra says, I need your help. And Dasarath says, it's such an honor even to be asked. Whatever you need, it's yours. Fateful words, right? Whatever you need, it's yours. Like my army, land, wealth, whatever you need, it's yours. And so Vishwamitra says, well, luckily for you, I don't need land or wealth or even you. I just need your son Ram. I need him to come with me and kill some really powerful demons. Dasarath he's brokenhearted. shattered. He's like, I just got my boy back. And he's only 16. Like his education is barely finished. I mean, he's learned it, but like we need like applicate like, where's the residency? Like if you get a doctor that just graduated from college, like here, perform the first surgery. Like, I think they need a little help. And so, Dasharat's thinking he just got finished with his schooling in theory. He hasn't had any applicable practice. How can I do this? I don't know if this is possible. He's like, I'll give you all my wealth. He's like, I don't want your wealth. He's like, I'll go myself. I'm a seasoned warrior. He's like, I don't want you. I need Ram. And so he's like, well, and finally Kaike comes in. She's like, I'm a warrior queen. I've been trained in all of the arts of warfare. Take me. Vishwamitra's like, I don't want you. I want Ram. And finally, he calls upon Vashishta. They've got this feud, so he throws a little shade at him, and he's like, is this how you treat your disciples? It's like this is what you've been teaching them. That when you get faced with something tough, you go back on your word, something that's never been done in their lineage ever. And so Vashishta Muni is, he finally says, he says you should give him Ram, but also send Lakshman because Lakshman finds it hard to even breathe without Ram. So send them both. Vishwamitra, he has so much mystical abilities that he could probably protect your sons, but he probably just needs an excuse to enact all of his supernatural powers. And they give him Ram and Lakshman, and they go on on this yatra, which is where we'll leave off. But yeah, there's this idea of what happens when you have these vows and these promises. Do they mean anything to us today? What, and I've often gotten that question a lot, even looking at Bhishma with his vows and all kinds of things. And people are like, well, why would he even keep up that vow? And I'm like, have you never kept up with something that you promised to somebody you love?
Mm.
It's
This is,
murky.
we're getting into murky waters here. I think thank you so much, Achyuta, for the story time and for leaving it off at such a interesting point. And it's interesting the way that you even started it, that Ramayan is not like high highs and it's kind of just like it gets a little better and then it's like okay, kind of here and then but
But definitely low lows.
definitely low lows. And it's like, I mean, I don't want to be bleak, but life is kind of like that actually. I think that a lot of us are what we're sold in kind of the idea of what a perfect life is supposed to be are these like really high highs. And I think the more that you live, the more that you realize it's not really like that. Or if there is a really high high, it must mean that there might be a low low coming soon. And I think that it's really beautiful how you mentioned, Achyuta, that Lord Ram, that like that God is coming in this form of Lord Ram to show us like, hey, it's not all it's cracked out to be when you're perfect. It's not all it's cracked out to be when you staunchly follow a vow, no matter what. And I think that that's really interesting because I mean, from the very little I know about the Ramayana, it's gonna get complicated and it's gonna get really intense and there's gonna be a lot of low lows. But I love this question that you left off with of like, what does our word mean today? And what do vows mean today? And I think it's just, I really don't like this topic. And the reason I don't like this topic is because I feel like I've reached a point like on a personal level where I feel like nobody's telling the truth anymore. So I just don't even bother. I was getting a haircut today, and the first question that the barbers, they were very chatty barbers. They were so nice. They were sweet, chatty in a good way. And the first question they wanted to know, because they saw that we were American, they were just like, so how's politics? How's Joe Biden? And I was just like, oh my God, no. I was like, I don't want to talk about this. But
Joe
they
Biden,
really
every day, we text. I
yeah.
ask him how his day's going. Like,
And not to get too much into politics because it's more murky waters, but it really all came down because I was talking about American politics, I was talking about European politics because I was letting them know that I lived here. I lived here in London. I did my master's degree in London a few years ago. I've been in South America and I know a lot about South American politics. And it all really came down to this, what you're talking about. It's like vows and truth and what people say. And people in power not necessarily following through with what they're going to say, and therefore it leads to a lot of murkiness, to a lot of distress. And I think in general, a lot of people are a little bit, what's that word I'm looking for, apathetic a little bit, to just like, Lane Lane is keeping it real. I'm trying to be like diplomatic and stuff. Lane is just they be lying.
They do be.
They do be. They do be. I mean, but that's really what it came down to. It's just like, man, like you just don't know who to trust anymore. And I think it has a lot to do with what you're saying, Achuta, of just like this vow or our truth or our word has become so watered down. But at the same time, and I think that this is the interesting point, at the same time, what's the other extreme? Because I feel like we're experiencing one extreme right now, which is like they be lying, like things are corrupt. And then the other extreme is like Ram and his family, and just like we're sticking to this vow no matter what. And it's like, oh, you need the kingdom? Okay, cool. Oh, you need my son after 16 years of him being away? I guess we have to do it because that's what we said. It's like, where's the
Yeah.
in between? And I think that that's the hard place to figure out.
Yeah, and with the Ram's dynasty, the Raghuvansh, I that was always a bit of a problem for me. Was like, even, at your own detriment, to it's like, I'm gonna follow this. The king that gives Vishvamitra his kingdom, he winds up having to like sell his wife and son because he's got nothing left. They die. He's like working in a graveyard. And the only thing that winds up saving him is an Akadashi. He winds up
Hmm.
passing on an Akadashi, and luckily his family comes back. And I remember like reading this story and watching movies about it when I was like 8 or 9. I was like sobbing. And then I was like, and that's it. We're not doing that anymore. We're not revisiting that. Like, I'm putting that down because it was just so incredibly heavy. Like, it just seems so unfair because it almost seems like the lesson is the more truthful you are, the more there's somebody willing to take advantage of that truthfulness.
Hmm.
And what I felt like with this Vishwamitra coming in, I'm like, but you're taking advantage of somebody. And especially as the sage with all of this knowledge and power and supernatural abilities, if you're taking advantage of somebody, how does that make this okay?
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
yeah, like I have a problem with the fairness of it. And I'm like, but how does that even out when it feels like to be truthful means that you are willingly putting yourself in a position to be taken advantage of and then living up to that?
I never saw The Princess Bride. I'm reading Jeffrey's. I guess I'm not as sensitive and tender of a man as I thought. I never saw
I cannot believe I've never seen The Princess Bride, man.
Is that the
Oh,
one with who's I don't know what is it an old movie?
yes. Oh, I mean, kind of. Like Humperdinck. No, nothing. Got nothing. Oh my
Like
God.
nine like 90s?
There are so many good lines from that movie that I have not been able to live with. I don't even know how I got to. Whatever.
I'm okay, we're
Man,
doing it.
clearly, we've
Okay,
got, yeah, marriage.
Lane hasn't seen it either. Lane hasn't seen it either. I have someone a comrade with me. Um, what was I gonna say? I can't remember because I got sidetracked by The Princess Bride. Oh yeah, I remember. Um, I also have a problem with that, and I think that because Chuta, you were talking about how like this unfairness around things, and I think that this is a like when I hear people say this, spiritualists in the Bhakti tradition, and even the barber, who just I was, this kind of adage. He just said like, well, the world's not fair, and the material world's not fair, and I'm just like, yes, that is true, and we live in this material world. Like I don't know, it just feels like kind of this impasse of just like, yeah, I understand it's not fair, but at the same time, like
You
I
want
don't
me
know.
to
I don't know what to say. It
you want me
sucks.
to tell you? You want me to tell
I
you?
want I want you to
Here's the
tell me,
thing, right?
please.
Yeah, terms and conditions apply. And that's the thing. Whenever I get into this, into my feelings, where I'm like, but this is not fair. And then I always look at like my deities, and then the clap back that I get, spiritually from God, from the God side, is whoever said that this was supposed to be fair.
Mm,
This material world is actually not supposed to be fair. You're supposed to leave.
mm,
You're supposed to get out.
mm,
Like the ultimate thing is like we're under this misconception that we belong here. This is our place and it's supposed to work out. It's supposed to be fair.
mm,
It's supposed to be this thing. And God's whole thing is you were with me. You don't belong here. It's not supposed to be fair. This whole thing is built up as a prison.
mm,
And people keep going, get out of jail. And we're like, yeah, but I've got such a good job in my jail community. And they're like,
mm,
but it's still jail. And you're like, but look at how nicely I've decorated my whole cell. Like, it's got my favorite
mm,
posters and all this stuff. And they're like, but get out of jail.
mm,
The jail system isn't even fair. And you're like, yeah, exactly. Get out of jail.
mm,
Durga means a prison. Like, it's supposed to
mm,
be a situation to help reform our souls to remember that this is not what we wanted. None of this is what we wanted. And so when I look at it and I'm like, oh my God, this is so unfair. And there's always going to be oppression. And they're even oppressing God. Like, look at this. Like, yeah, yes. When I come into this place, they're even going to try and oppress me. And I'm perfect.
mm, mm.
Oh, yeah. It always comes back to, oh man, am I
I
truly?
know, I know. But what I'm hearing really is that even when God comes as a perfect being, he is also oppressed. And I think what's really important, or at least what I'm hearing and learning as well in this life, is that the lessons that we gain from those oppressions and from that imperfectness and from that unfairness, like that's what makes us get closer to getting out or get closer to coming back into communion with God. And I think that that's like a constant thing that we need to remind ourselves of, because I remember there's so many examples of in the Bhagavatam and in our Bhakti literatures, Ram, we're talking about Sri Ram. There's so many examples of people and like saintly people like just going through it, losing everything, you know, and their mood is, you know, great, I lost everything. Now I'm closer to you, God. And I always like think about that, like it's so beautiful and it's very poetic, and you know, I admire it and I aspire to it, but at the same time it's just like I you know like we like our things, you know, we like our things. I'll leave it at that. We like our things.
Yeah, we
And
do.
we do. And I'm just like wondering the what is the gap, or what is the, you know, I feel like there's a certain level of courage that we need to have that a lot of us don't. I'm including myself in this, of being with discomfort, and and by discomfort I mean like things being taken away from us, you know, like losing things that we're attached to, losing our conceptions of identity or of society, you know, like really just putting all of that on the line for something higher than us. It's like I don't think many people are ready to do that nowadays. You know, it's very me and I and mine, and like I'm looking out for myself and this kind of thing. And it's like if we're talking about getting out or transcendence, or like, you know, moving out of this kind of material thing that we're in, it's like there I feel like there needs to be a little bit more of a dramatic, and I think that that's why stories like the Ramayan are really important, because they're quite dramatic, you know, and they take us to those bleak places because we need that example of like, girl, it's going to be tough, it's going to be hard, like it is not going to be cute, you know. And it's like I myself, I'm naturally I'm a person that likes like nice things and you know, I always have to remind myself, I'm like, man, this is an attachment, I need to get rid of this someday or another. And I always tell myself, I'm like, you know, maybe when I'm like 50 or something like that, or like 60, like I'll stop. But it's like what, and this is a question, you know, you don't have to have the answer to it, but I'm just like wondering, like that gap between that's keeping us in our attachments, in our like, you know, in our stuff, like what is it that's keeping us from being fearless and just like, yeah, bring on the onslaught of, you know, taking all this stuff away from me, bring on the onslaught of life, you know. I'm wondering like what is it that keeps us from taking that step into it. I'm not sure.
I mean, I feel like it goes, and I'm a person, I'm a luxurious person. I really like
Yeah.
luxurious. So
Me too.
I'm all about it. I love it. um, and I think it goes back to this idea that we were both talking about, like sitting with our feelings, sitting with
Mm,
the loneliness, let it ferment you, you know. But what does that loneliness mean? Is it just a loneliness on a, oh, I don't have anybody to talk to? No, it's a loneliness about what happens when all this stuff that you think makes you up is taken away. Then what happens? Are we so quick to like run and find the next thing that's going to give us
mm,
comfort, or are we actually sitting with this going, okay, this is like a big life lesson. Like there are some things that are like temporary issues, and then there's some big life lessons. And you know, I feel like in Srimad Bhagavatam, you know, Prahlad Maharaj says it best. It's like happiness and distress are automatically coming by the arrangement of nature. Nobody asks for a fever, and it comes anyway. So you know, all the times when we're like, but I never asked for these bad things to happen. It's like, yeah, nobody ever does, but it's going to happen because that's material nature. Like here, you've got these hardcore, harsh dualities.
mm,
And that's the harshest truth, is that this place is a place of duality. And even harsher is the fact that we all know it. We all know it.
mm,
Just as we know that there is no one who has ever lived forever. And every time somebody has to pass away, we're never ready.
mm,
Like we all know it. Never have we seen anybody who's lived forever. Never. And they could be however old they are, and still someone's never ready.
mm,
So I think, you know, we kind of delude ourselves for a long time. And, you know, I think it, you know, to use our favorite word, it behooves us to remember that this is not just like a one lifetime thing that we've been feeding
mm,
ourselves this narrative. This has been conditioning over lifetimes, that we've been conditioning ourselves that no, I should be able to find some happiness here. I should be able to find that high that I'm looking for that is never ending. And for eons, you know, it's been like, but this place is completely temporary. There's never going to be a high that lasts forever here because it's a temporary place. It's not how this place works. And we're putting all of our, you know, we've been talking about this, putting all of our eternal needs into this temporary vessel, hoping that it fills all the things that we've been looking for. And then when it doesn't, we're so disappointed. We've been
mm,
looking in all the wrong places.
mm. You know what I just thought would be a really good idea for maybe after Ram Leela? We can talk about this. But I think, you know, we've used this Srila Prabhupada-ism for a while now of just like being correctly situated, right? And I feel like I remember I was listening to a lecture by Radhanath Swami, and I've heard him tell this story quite a couple of times. And to make a very long story short, it was just like he was giving a program, and there was some PhD college professor who studied uh, Hinduism and Hindu mythology and Hindu gods, and he was just like an absolute 100% expert. And not only that, he was a specialist in Krishna, like he was just like completely specialized in Krishna. And so he heard Radhanath Swami giving this lecture, and so afterwards, he had a question for Avinath Swami where he was just like, you know, I'm an expert in all of this stuff, and I know about all the Indian gods and all the Hindu gods. It's like, why Krishna? You know, like why you know, I would understand for people that maybe were like born into this or like whatever, but like you weren't born into this. You like chose this. Like, why Krishna? Krishna's like mischievous, and Krishna's crazy, and Krishna's a, you know, he's just like with all the gopis all over the place, and just like a thief, and like it's just a nuisance. Like, why Krishna? And Radhanath Swami gives him many answers, but one of the answers I thought was really important, and this is why I'm thinking of this, is he asked the college professor, he was like, have you studied the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita? Like that was like the first thing he said to him. And the college professor was like, no, I haven't. And he's like, well, you need to. Basically, was in a very long, he gave a long answer, but in a short way. And the reason he said that was because before we start jumping towards trying to figure out the material world, or trying to figure out like, oh, why is Krishna like this, or trying to go into deeper pastimes of divinity and finding out like why can't I be like this, or why can't I have like this, it really, we'll use our favorite word, behooves us to understand like, what is this world, you know, what is this material nature, what is the soul, what is the spirit, how does it all work together? You know, are we supposed to be here? Are we not supposed to be here? All these questions that we have about existence, about this world, about life, it's like, it's all there. And that's what Radhanath Swami was saying. He's like, it's all there in the second chapter. And he's like, and you need to read that first before you start reading all these other things about Krishna.
Also, I
And
thought you said he was an expert, bro. My bro. I thought you said.
apparently not.
Like, Bhagavad Gita is one of the staples. Like that's not like, come on.
Apparently not. Apparently not. Apparently he jumped towards Raslila. Um, but anyway, yeah, maybe we can do that, because that's what I was really hearing. It's just like, we need to understand on a real level about what our trajectory here in this life is. Because if not if, like you mentioned, Pachuta, like we've been conditioned lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes to think and to behave like, I'm going to suck the happiness out of this temporary situation. I'm going to find that high. I'm going to do it. Watch. I'm going to do it. And if you look at the world, that's what people are doing. It's like, watch me. I'm going to do it. I'm going to get it. And it's like, we really need to come back down to the real reality, and see like, hey, what is this actually all about? So maybe that could be an interesting place we go to. But I really appreciated this conversation, Achita. It was so sweet. It was
And
so
that's why,
nice.
that's why we have 9 cantos of Bhagavatam before you even get to the 10th canto. Like, you start off in the first canto and you have a little bit about Krishna, and then we go back to the beginning of time, literally.
Literally.
And we have to work our way towards, instead of like level jumping into like, and and while I do say it often, it's like Krishna's my best friend, but it's because like, and at like 8 or 9, I was kind of reading up and studying Ramayana, and it was like a big thing for me because there were so many movies about it. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj used to say that we worship Krishna instead of Ram for very specific reasons. He's like,
Mm,
Ram's not going to cheat for you. Like Krishna is
mm,
going to cheat for all of his devotees. It's like
mm,
he'd always say, he's like, we need a God who's crooked. Ram is too straight. He's gonna follow every rule and all the things. And he's like, and we are so bad at that. We are so bad at following all the rules. But Krishna, he's gonna cheat at every angle. He's gonna figure out a way to make it work. And so whenever I think about Ram and I think about Krishna, I'm always like, my gosh, I can only imagine. I understand why the next time you're like, I'm not doing this anymore. That was not not what I wanted.
I love that. Oh my God, I think that's the perfect place to end. I love that. Maybe, yeah, we can talk about that a little bit more. But I agree. We definitely need a God who's gonna cheat for us, and just do a little bit of this for us. Kimberly, let us hear some takeaways, and if anyone else has any takeaways, you can write them in the chat as well.
I'm taking away a reflection on what it means for me to be intentional when creating and sticking to my vows and my words, and understanding that when I'm truthful and even when I stick to my words, like things won't always be fair, but that's okay, because the imperfectness and the unfairness is all an opportunity for me to get closer to a higher power. And I liked how Jeffrey worded it in the comments. He said that the lesson of unfairness prompts us to communion with God. And I thought that was really beautiful.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Yeah, I also really love the way that Jeffrey put it. I was like, that needs to go on a shirt somewhere. We need to start some merch for Spirit Matters. Like, that would be great. A shirt that just says, behooves us. It behooves us. And then on the back, what Jeffrey said. Oh, beautiful. Thank you all so much for being here with us. Thank you for our live studio audience, Pasha, Rachna, Lex, Kristen, all the way in the Philippines, Rini, Irenka, all the way in Washington Square Park, Kimberly in California, Bay Area, Leishwari in Brazil, Lane and Pasha in the Pacific Northwest. I got it wrong. It is not California. It's up there, Washington, I think, right? Washington State. And Jeffrey, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We will be back maybe tomorrow. I need to confirm, so we'll update on the Rise platform, because we start filming tomorrow, but we'll let you know. Thank you all so much and have a beautiful day. Thank you, Achita.